He was Hollywood's iron-gored outlaw, the lone rider with a stare that could silence a room. But behind Jack Palance's steely screen presence was a man of immense solitude and quiet sorrow. He built a life on strength, yet ended his days in stillness, away from cameras, away from noise, and away from the fame he never fully embraced. And now, the house he once called home stands eerily silent, abandoned, overgrown, and forgotten. Much like the man himself, this is the haunting story of Jack Palance's hidden heartbreak, his final retreat into silence, and the fortune he left behind. At the peak of his career, Jack Palance owned a grand Beverly Hills estate, a Georgian colonial revival masterpiece built in 1940. Designed by the legendary architect Paul R. Williams, the home exuded old Hollywood charm with its arched doorways, detailed molding, and rich hardwood floors. It had 5 bedrooms, 5 baths, and sun-drenched windows that poured light into rooms once filled with laughter, guests, and echoes of cinematic glory. The backyard boasted a saltwater pool, a fire pit, and scenic privacy that made it a jewel of the Beverly Hills post office district. At one time, it represented success, but in the end, it would only represent a memory. Years passed, and the shine of fame dulled. The house, like the man, grew quieter, lonelier. After Palance's departure, the estate was listed for $3.95 million, but despite its architectural elegance, something about it felt empty, abandoned. Once a sanctuary, the home now stood as a shadow, the forgotten frame of a life once lived loudly, now hushed by time and dust. Jack Palance never returned to it. He had already retreated elsewhere. In the rolling hills of California's misty Tehachapi Mountains, Jack Palance found the silence he craved on a 1,300-acre ranch. Far from the city lights, he lived humbly among cattle, horses, and wind-swept grasses. The ranch house was modest. Simple beams, a stone fireplace, and the kind of worn-in warmth that came from working the land. Here, he painted landscapes, wrote poetry, and lived with purpose, not as a movie star, but as a man, alone, content, and at peace. But Palance's soul never truly left Pennsylvania. Near his hometown of Hazleton, he maintained Hallibrook Farm, a 240-acre sanctuary named after his daughters, with its antique red brick farmhouse from the 1850s, creaking floors, and rooms filled with handwritten poems and saddles. It was his bridge to the past, a reminder of where he came from and who he really was before the fame. He rode horses across the open land, quietly watching seasons shift across hills that never changed. In 2006, after a long life marked by strength and solitude, Jack Palance died peacefully at 87, surrounded by family at his daughter's home in Montecito, California. Just years before, he had made the painful decision to auction off pieces of his beloved Hollybrook furniture and memories that had defined him. It was the closing of a chapter. The man who once stood unshaken on screen had found his final rest. Quietly, privately, and far from the spotlight. At the time of his death, Jack Palance's net worth was estimated in the millions, bolstered by real estate, ranches, and his film career. But the fortune he left behind wasn't just in dollars, it was in legacy, in brushstrokes on canvas, in lines of poetry, in the earth he tilled with his own hands, the wealth of a man who had lived fully, not for glory, but for meaning. Born Vladimir Palanac in the cold-ested village of Latimer Mines, Pennsylvania, he was the son of Ukrainian immigrants. As a boy, he shoveled coal in the same mines where his father worked, learning the weight of hardship early. His escape came through grit, first in the boxing ring, then on the stage, and finally on the silver screen. He never forgot where he came from, not for a second. In World War II, while training to fly a B-24 bomber, Palance survived a horrific crash. He was badly injured, his face scarred, his body changed forever. But from those wounds came the gaunt, unforgettable features that would define his Hollywood image. What some might have hidden, Palance turned into power. He carried his scars with quiet pride, proof that he had lived, fought, and endured. He changed his name to Jack Palance, but never changed who he was. A coal miner's son, a fighter, a poet, a man of few words and even fewer needs. He left behind an abandoned house in Beverly Hills, but also a story etched in the hills of California and the soil of Pennsylvania. A legacy not of luxury, but of life. Fully lived, quietly ended, and forever remembered.